Hello, 12 Nation. I'm your host, Saahil Kapoor. You're on the Hawk Alert. Today, we're talking about the defensive coordinator vacancy and some candidates that I have in mind that could fill the spot that Ken Norton previously held. Cue that intro. The first guy on my mind is Ed Donatel, former Broncos defensive coordinator. And the reason I say this is the guy's been in the 4-3 defensive scheme for a long time. The Broncos, he was part of the 2015 Broncos Super Bowl, and the Seattle Seahawks beat him in 2013. We annihilated that Denver Bronco defense. But the main thing about Donatel is a lot of people say if the Seahawks hire Donatel, a really popular free agent in the name of Von Miller may be attracted to coming to Seattle. Donatel and Miller have a great relationship, and it's lasted over a decade. So I think maybe if the Seahawks could sign Ed Donatel, we could see Von Miller in the Seattle Seahawks uniform. And as we saw this past season, the pass rush was terrible. That could possibly be the weakest part. Some say offensive line. In my opinion, it was the pass rush. It was barely getting any pressure on the quarterback. It seemed like one guy had to step up every game. The Seahawks signed Kerry Hyder to an $8 million contract. That didn't work out, right? And it seems like Von Miller may be the start of something new. Maybe Von Miller could come in to Seattle and he could be a leader for some of these young guys and potentially help that defense, the defensive pass rush improve. And Donatel has really been coaching for a long time. And the name Ed Donatel could also attract another name like Chandler Jones. Chandler Jones, we all know as a great run stopper, pass rusher. He's a great at pressuring the quarterback. And if the Seahawks were able to get Chandler Jones and Von Miller, two all-pro veterans, this would be a game-changing move for Seattle, especially with the amount of the lack of pass rush that the Seahawks had last season. Donatel is one of many candidates. The second favorite candidate in mind is Shawn Desai. And the reason I say Shawn Desai is because all year long he ran the 4-3 scheme in Chicago, and he beat Seattle with the 4-3 scheme in the snow. Desai also is 38 years old, and he's also a very great defensive guy. He's only coached 1 year, and it seems like his defense is so experienced, and it seems like his defense has been like together for the last like 10 years. They communicate really well. He runs the 4-3 really efficiently, and Desai is a defensive guy. And I was looking up Desai, and so what happened was he broke his ankle freshman year of high school, and his parents didn't want him to play football. So what he did is he started studying the game, and he just became a great defensive guy, and he knows so much about defense. And a young guy at 38 could potentially fill Pete Carroll's shoes, right? Pete Carroll also loves 4-3. I mean, the dude has run it every single year since the USC era. Even in years where they run the 4-2-5 a little more, Pete Carroll is a strong 4-3 guy. And a guy like Desai already coming from a 4-3 environment would really help the Seahawks and would keep them on the same pace. And Desai could also make some personnel changes and some things that he thinks the Seahawks could do better. Donatel and Desai have both been the Seahawks have both requested interviews with Desai and Donatel. Hopefully they can get those done. And I would love to see one of them as a future coordinator in Seattle. Let's get on to the next guy. So the next guy, I'm just saying some of these names because they'd fit amazing. it's impossible that this guy. I mean, it's an insanely small chance that this guy could be a Seattle Seahawk defensive coordinator next season. But I'm just gonna say his name. In my opinion, he's the best defensive coordinator in the league, Leslie Frazier. His defense was insane last year. He had two All-Pro safeties. His secondary was good. His pass rush was good, except in the AFC divisional game. His pass rush was a little iffy, but his secondary was amazing. And Frazier, I don't really need to talk a lot. If you follow a lot of football, you know who Leslie Frazier is, and you know how good of a coach he is. The issue with Leslie Frazier is he's probably going to become a head coach. He's already been in talks with teams like the Giants and the Jaguars. So I don't think we'll see Leslie Frazier as a defensive coordinator of the Seahawks. Unfortunately, but he is a great guy. That was just a bit of a dream thing that I said, but yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way because if the Seahawks somehow can get Leslie Frazier, Super Bowl, here we come. But that's probably not going to happen. Next guy is Mike Zimmer. A lot of people know his name. Previous head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, and he was fired. And he's a very good defensive guy, and that's what people fail to realize. Some can say the Vikings weren't very good when he was there, and one of the issues is Mike Zimmer is a big defensive guy, and in years like 2019, he was very good, and he led his team to a 13-3 record. He brought up the name Eric Kendricks. He knows good defensive players. In 2019, his defense was a really good defense. He brought in Yannick Ngakoue, names like Everson Griffin, like I said, Kendricks, Anthony Barr, a lot of these guys, Harrison Smith, he stuck with him, and Trey Waynes. A lot of these guys have stuck with Mike Zimmer, and Mike Zimmer did have issues in Minnesota, but if Mike Zimmer is looking to become a defensive coordinator, kind of like Dan Quinn, how he went from head coach to defensive coordinator, that would be amazing, right? What happened when so Dan Quinn was terrible as a head coach in Atlanta, and then he goes to a defensive coordinator and he transforms a bottom five defense to a top five defense in a year by adding one rookie big name. So, like Mike Zimmer, if he comes into Seattle and he's a veteran guy and he knows what he's doing, I mean, he's experienced for sure. 30 years, he's lived all his life playing the sport of football. He knows all about football. He's been coaching for 30 years. He knows what he's going to do. So a guy like Mike Zimmer would be great to have. At the end of the day, these are the four main guys. I I really think you don't want to promote anyone else, and I think these are the four main guys. I'm gonna put it in a bit of a tier ranking from realism. So I have Desai at first. I have Donatel at second, Zimmer at third, and Leslie Frazier at fourth. And my personal favorite's obviously Leslie Frazier, but besides that, it's probably Shawn Desai. Shawn Desai is young, and that's why. And also another name I forgot to add was Todd Bowles, but it also seems like Todd Bowles is going to be looking for a head coaching job. Like so many of these guys are great defensive coordinators, but there's so much demand at the head coaching spot right now. We have 8 spots that haven't been filled in the NFL, and it seems like people want defensive guys. We saw Robert Saleh go to the Jets from the 49ers, and it just seems like teams want defensive guys because defense is how you win games, right? And guys like Spagnuolo, Bowles, a lot of these guys are looking like they're going to become head coaches next season. Like I said, Frazier. But yeah, I mean, let's say the Seahawks can somehow get a defensive coordinator that is elite right now, like Todd Bowles or Spagnuolo or Frazier, then that would be great, right? But it seems like that's not going to happen. So in this case, I think my favorite is Shawn Desai, and I feel like Donatel and Zimmer are a bit too old, especially since Carroll. It looks like he's about to leave in a few years. So Desai potentially could be the coordinator for a year or two, and the way he's been looking in Chicago, how he's had such a good pass rush, and I think maybe in a few years, I think Shawn Desai could become the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks because the way he runs the 4-3, he can just inherit the same system that Pete Carroll has, change up a few things, let Waldron do his thing. I think Desai would be a great head coach for the Seattle Seahawks. And what's better than signing a 38-year-old that's destined for great things? I mean, we see so many coordinators that are young, like Josh McDaniels, offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, offensive guy. I mean, these guys that are young are really good. Shanahan, McVay, LaFleur, like those three guys I named are under 50, and they're they're top 10 coaches. McVay is the best in the league. Shanahan's like, in my opinion, the third best coach in the league, and LaFleur is like top 5 too. Those are those are three young guys. And a guy like Desai, he potentially could become a head coach of a team. And I think you don't want to risk it. Just sign Desai right now, lock him in, get him used to this Seattle weather, whatever. It's a Seattle organization. Get him locked in Seattle. Let him do his thing. When Carroll leaves, promote him to HC. Have Waldron under OC. Find a guy to fill that DC spot, and this team is back to a Super Bowl caliber team. And I think even Desai in the next few years, they're going to be still a good team because the guy Desai is. He knows good defensive players like Robert Quinn, got him, and look what Robert Quinn did this season, right? So he seems like a good pass rush guy, and I think my guy is Desai. That rhymes, right? Like, let's make that a thing. My guy is Desai. Um, so yeah, thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, make sure to subscribe. Follow the Twitter and Instagram. Those will be in the description below. If you love the Seahawks, subscribe. We're going to be here all off season talking about players, defensive coordinators that could fill the job, all that. So make sure to subscribe. Signing off.